all my relations. Welcome to another program, Eagle and the Condor. And be sure to tell your friends to tune in every Sunday at 4 o'clock. This program, we have a lot of competition with all these sports teams that come on, but you'll want to watch this one, this program, as often as you can. Tell your friends. And today, my relatives, I have a very important feature film documentary of sorts, if you will. It's called Alambrista. And the original Alambrista, as many listeners may be aware, was in 1977. And indeed, it was also the recipient of an award by, I believe it's the Cannes Film Festival in 1978. And it went on a film circuit, etc. It's not in so much in circulation, but it was revived in 2004. It was by Robert Young or Bob Young, and it includes a lot of people. But in particular for this film that we're going to show you, my relatives, we have a very special guest in the studio or in my house in this show, and that is Dr. Jose Cuellar, aka Dr. Loco. And you might remember him, seeing him in the beginnings of our program, Eagle and the Condor. He's playing the flute to welcome all our listeners to the program. And I've invited Dr. Jose Cuellar to join us, and in this case with this film, people that find themselves having crossed into the United States and the hardships and witnessing, living through the discrimination that many of us, Chicanos, Mexicanos, Mexican Americans, and others have experienced here in the fields, in the valleys, and everyday society discrimination. In their case, referred to many times as wetbacks or greasers, or even telling them go back to where you came from. And these are peoples of the Americas, my relatives. Indeed, it's a big issue. Perhaps in the following weeks ahead, I will be inviting some very special friends who can also enlighten us to this national issue of congressional proportions, that indeed it's in the U.S. Congress, this bill, H.R. 1511, and referred to as the registry bill. And we'll be talking to you more about that in the weeks ahead with these guests. And the bill itself, with passage, will include the citizenship for 8 to 11 million peoples here in North America, the United States. So it's not just Mexican Americans or farm workers or undocumented people, but all those that are in the outskirts of society and not receiving the benefits that they rightly should, having come here to seek a better life from climate change, weather conditions in their farming, or jobs, or the repression in the countries that they come from. But this is what this film generally is about, and the topic, including the bill, the congressional bill, H.R. 1511. Now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jose Cuellar. In this film, I noticed that your musical group and yourself is in the background. Can you share with us the meaning of the film itself, and how visionary is it?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important and impressive about this film is the background, the issue of why we decided to bring and do the director's cut. 1999, the director, Robert Young, along with then already very popular Chicano actor James Olmos, met with my colleague and friend David Carrasco, then at Princeton, and told him that they were interested in doing this film. That was Eddie Olmos' first acting film, and Robert Young's first directional feature film that he had made with a very small grant from the Guggenheim Foundation. And so they had done this in 76, 77. It went to the Cannes Film Festival in 77, won an award, came back, and it toured some of the film festivals. But because Robert Young did not get the rights to the music that was being used in the film, he really couldn't release it commercially. So he was interested, as we found out later, in doing a director's cut that could be directed, that could be released as a commercial venture. And he wanted a new soundtrack because he couldn't use the existing soundtrack for the commercial venture because he didn't have the rights to the music. So they went to talk to David Carrasco, as now the scene has evolved, to see if he could get them a grant or connect them with some granting agency that they could do. And, they wanted to do the soundtrack. But Carrasco said, well, I know somebody who could do the soundtrack. Let's call him. So they called me from his office, and he asked me if I'd ever seen the film. And I immediately said, yes, I did. I saw it once in 78. This was 20 years later, 21 years later. I saw it once in 78 at Santa Barbara. And I was really impressed because I had never seen a film about Mexican farm workers. And in the 70s, I had always thought of farm workers as Mexican Americans. These are U.S. migrating, like from my relatives and friends from Texas that would migrate north and to Michigan or to California. But I had never really thought about the undocumented as other than as scabs, folks that were interfering with the strikes. But never a face or a history or a biography or who this person might be. And so that was the thing that impressed me most as a Chicano at that point in 78 was, wow, I had no idea. So it really had that kind of impression. And so I began to relate that. They said they wanted to do the film, they wanted to do the soundtrack. And they asked me if I was interested in doing the soundtrack. And I said, sure. So I did the soundtrack, first tape of existing music, and then they told me I had to write the original music. So I put together a group, Francisco Herrera, Tomas Montoya on guitar, and then Saúl Sierra on bass and Brian Anders on drums. And we wrote, Francisco, Tomas, and I primarily wrote the soundtrack and wow. Recorded it in the East Bay, and for a budget of $15,000, as cheap as one could do it. So we did that, and our intent was to we wanted to put this film with a book, Alambrista, Stories and Music of Undocumented Immigrants, to document for the 2004 election. We thought this 2000 is just a director's cut. Cut and paste, put the new soundtrack. You could get it done before the election. Get it done maybe 1 or 2 years before the election and bring this issue to the forefront, raising the question, what has changed? When this film was made in 78, what has changed regarding the undocumented situation from 78 to now? What are the similarities and differences of people that are coming, the motivations, the circumstances, etc.? Is it different or is it still the same? Is it better? Is it worse? And we wanted this film and the book of accompanying essays to stimulate and provoke a discussion around immigration. And we thought this would be great for we hoped the incoming Obama administration to use it to raise these issues. So that was our intent. A political statement, academic. So the University of New Mexico Press published the book when we finished the recording, and it was exactly 20 years ago this month that we went to the studio. We had finished the recording, we went to the studio, and we decided to do the soundtrack live. Screen the film and play the music against the film so we could fit the mood and the sentiments. So that's how we recorded it live in Cerrito Studios over I think a 4-day period. So we did the film, put together the book, released the book, but it was 2004, it was too late for the election. So when we finally got it out, and frankly, it did not make the splash that we thought it would have should have made in terms of impacting public policy. Because when you read the book, you will see that the essays by scholars, Alberto Camarillo and Tisa Carrillo from Stanford, Bill Ong from Stanford, the law school. I mean, we had some really impressive scholars who wrote on these issues. And then we have also accompanying the videos with the book, this New Mexico book, a series of interviews with scholars and others regarding these circumstances that are reflected in this film.
Oh no, that's terrific. Thank you for summarizing its growth, development, and we're coming up to 2024 voting and elections in general. And as I said to our relatives, on the program earlier, that this is of national issue proportions and public policy, as you say, and the congressional bill, HR 1511, which will hopefully have some guests to further expound on the issue itself. But Dr. Cuellar, Jose, yourself as a professor and emeritus and in anthropology and understanding society and the currents and flows through the Americas, how can you tell us in the terms of the eagle and the condor of this natural migration, and how do we come to terms?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that the kind of immigration documented in this film is the immigration that I've taken the liberty of modifying a quote from Mircea Eliade. And he wrote a book called The Myth of Eternal Return. We talked at how there's rituals in societies, quote, primitive societies, that are about returning an eternal return back to the origins, back to roots. I took that and said, the motivation of the migration that we're seeing here is motivated by the myth of eventual return. I'm going to go to the United States, I'm going to work, and eventually I'm going to come back with my money and start buy my rancho, pay for my house, my kids' school. This is what it was before the 1980s. People come across, there were stops, sometimes not stops, let through. The media would play games with them. But it really was not about stopping the immigration or people moving here because not of kind of in some ways what you described the American dream. That is, we want to go to the United States for a better life. But it's really motivated by the Central American and South American nightmare. Created by U.S. intervention, as one Gonzales has documented in his book, the Harvest of Empire, that wherever the United States intervenes in Latin America, from there we will have the next major immigration. The United States intervened in Venezuela. Where are they coming from? Venezuela. They have not intervened in Costa Rica. The fewest immigrants from Central America, Costa Ricans. It's very simple hypothesis that Juan put in his book that very few people are really thinking about and understanding, and like to put, I think, the myth of the American dream as the motivation. Oh, they're all looking for a better life. Of course. The U.S. has ruined their life and their country. Of course they're looking for a better life. And some are trying to get here because this is the place that owes them that better life. Not living in Mexico and not, in other parts of the Americas. So the refugees were refugees caused by American policies. And I think that's the difference between what we see here, where he's motivated by money, but he wants to get money so he can feed his baby daughter and his family and like that. So his story is, I'm going to go to the United States for a few, and then I'll be back. And the mother says, so you see at the beginning of the film, the mother says, you're going to go like your father. And he never came back. The myth of eventually returning. They get stuck. And that's what's the difference between people who wanted to go back and were planning on going back and were stuck, as opposed to people who leave everything and say, I don't think I'll ever go back. I don't think I can go back. There's only one way, that's forward. So I think that's something for us to understand how this has changed. And also you see primarily males in the immigrant. It is now almost half and half, maybe even more females now immigrating
And a third, children.
And children. So a whole different set of categories of people immigrating, reasons, motivations, etc. So this is a good documentary, although it's a feature film, on what it was like before the postmodern wave of Central American and South American interventions by the United States.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jose Cuellar. My relatives, I'm glad you're mentioning about the reasons people were leaving. By and large, the militarization of the United States and interference in those areas. And we just commemorated one of those occasions just this September 11th. In the Western Hemisphere, we've had this September 11th of 1973 with the overthrow there in Chile of Salvador Allende and the dictatorship of Pinochet. 17 years of that drove a lot of people from Chile as well. And that's what we are still witnessing, if not the residue of that military influence. Thank you very much, Dr.
Yes, thank you.
Cuellar. My relatives, before we get into that feature documentary type film of Alambrista that Dr. Jose Cuellar and I have been talking about, I just want to give you a few announcements, if I may. First of all, we just had a 79th birthday celebration commemoration for Leonard Peltier, September the 12th. 79 years, my relatives, and he's been in prison for 48 of those years, and it's time that he come home, and he's in there for a crime he did not commit. There's many people that were prosecuting him during that time with the federal government who have now turned toward helping the release for Leonard Peltier. In fact, there was a former FBI agent, a woman by the name of Conley or Calway, who said that it's a vendetta against Leonard Peltier within the FBI system, and that in fact they train their FBI recruits to know about Indian history, to include Leonard Peltier and that situation. So call the White House Monday through Friday at 202-456-1111. That's 202-456-1111. Do that starting tomorrow, Monday, my relatives. And here, more locally in California, on September the 22nd, that's the fourth Friday of September, and each and every fourth Friday in September is declared by Governor Newsom as California Native American Day. And there'll be a special occasion in Sacramento on that day, the 22nd, from 10 to 6 p.m., I believe, at the west steps of the Sacramento Capitol building, my relatives. So the public is welcome. Join in. There'll be California Indian people from all across the state. There'll be powwow, vendors, information and exchange. A great event, my relatives. And that's on the 22nd of September. Also in October that's coming right around the corner. We'll probably talk more about it later, but on Saturday, October the 7th, is Indigenous Peoples Day, the annual Berkeley Powwow. That's the 31st annual powwow in Berkeley, so mark your calendars now. And on Monday, October the 9th, is the annual Sunrise Gathering at Alcatraz at Pier 33. The boats leave at 4:30. First boats leave at 4:30, and so get your tickets. Call the International Indian Treaty Council right to them. That's iitc.org for more ticket and information. That's Monday, October the 9th. And Mr. Bill Means, board member of the International Treaty Council and member of American Indian Movement, will be coming into the Bay Area to help host the occasion there at Alcatraz, my relatives. And so it is, let me go here real quickly, that be sure to watch the Eagle and the Condor show. Tell your friends. Also, I have a radio show on KPFA here in Berkeley, 94.1 FM. And that's Bay Native Circle on Wednesdays with a team. I have a crew there with Janine Antoine, Eddie Madril, Morningstar Gali, and myself rotating on Wednesdays. And I also host Across Indian Land on La Onda Bajita Lowrider Show, Friday nights, KPFA, from 8 to 10. I have a half hour, sometimes an hour segment. That's the second and the third Friday of each month, my round. All right, having said that, let's go into the film Alambrista.